Welcome into this Telstra virtual event. I'm Justin Cleveland. We are talking about your social selfie today and figuring out if what you think you are is how you are perceived online. It might seem very simple because you think, well, I go onto Twitter, I go onto Facebook, I post only what I want. But that's only a very small portion of how you are perceived online. Before we talk about my various guests for today's performance, I want to run you through some of the cool things you can do on the platform here on On24. If you have any sort of the widgets on the bottom, you get all kinds of information. So pop them on up. You can ask us questions at any point during the presentation. I encourage you to ask a question because if you're thinking it, a lot of other people are thinking it as well. So you can move around the windows and resize them as you'd like. Feel free to play around in the platform. So joining me on the presentation today, first, Jeremy Smith. He's an online reputation management expert from Xanity. Jeremy, good afternoon and welcome to the program.
Good afternoon.
Also here joining me in Sydney is Stan Relihan. He's a social selling guru with PRA. Welcome, Stan.
Hi, good afternoon.
Vicki Holland is also in Melbourne with Jeremy. She is an ICT development executive here at Telstra. Welcome, Vicki.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And I'm Justin Cleveland. I'm your manager and host for this event today. And before we got started today, I just did a quick Google search of myself. I wanted to find out, what do people see when they look up Justin Cleveland? And what I found out is they don't find me. They find a financial planner from Texas. They find a college football player from the 2000s from USC in California. They find a mugshot, which is less than flattering. Fortunately, not mine, but they also find, before they find me, information about a concert by Justin Bieber in Cleveland, Ohio. And it's outright embarrassing because I think of myself as a social person. I think of myself as being in tune with the digital sphere. But there are a lot of problems that I have, that I deal with in my name. Obviously, it's a fairly common first name, particularly for people my age. My last name is a city, and it's also, it's several streets here in Sydney. It's a very common last name as well. We're going to get into some of the hurdles that your name can cause and some of the ways that you can overcome them in just a minute. But first I want to ask you in the audience, did you just Google yourself? Did you look yourself up? Or are you paying attention to the performance today? I feel like I'm in the teacher in front of the classroom. Are you paying attention? So let me know. Were you writing an email? Are you clued into the presentation today? And you know what? I'm actually going to encourage you to Google yourself as well. I want you to get an idea of where you are at. So actually, here we go. So a quarter of you are, and the most of you are actually going to do it right now. So fantastic. So I want to welcome into the presentation right now Jeremy Smith from Xanity to take us through the social selfie, because I think although social media is relatively new, it has quickly taken over our perspective. It is what we see and what we look up. We might find a news story, we might find a blog entry, but ultimately it is your social media presence that defines who you are. So Jeremy, take us through.
Fantastic. Thank you, Justin. So we are going to be looking at how you appear online, and a lot of people start to think off and start to say to me, well, I don't have a digital profile. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a sports star. I'm not a global leader in, I don't run Microsoft, for example. But in this day and age, in 2014, you have a digital profile, whether you like it or not. It could be a combination of these accounts, these accounts that we've got up here. It could be on Yahoo, it could be on Google+, it could be, on the Telstra website if you work for Telstra, for example. But even if you don't have content out there, even if you're invisible on your corporate website, if you're invisible on LinkedIn, and if you're not available to be found, that also says something about your digital profile as well. And on the other side of things, if you don't have a digital profile, if you choose not to engage with YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, for example, other people can still mention you. Other people can still talk about you. They can say things about you. So regardless of you consciously and proactively engaging, you will still have a digital profile. So the main thing I'd like to put the point across is that there's a digital profile regardless if you like it or not, and it's up to you to manage it. So the content they can find can vary significantly. So some of the content can be positive, so it can be a really well-crafted LinkedIn profile coming up number one. That's awesome. It can be negative. It could be a Facebook photo that your friend tagged at a Bucks weekend that you don't want to appear highly on Google, but it's nothing to do with you. Someone else wants to do with you, but it's not to do with your choice. But it can appear there. It can be unrelated. So like Justin's example, it could be Justin Bieber, in Cleveland. It can be people with a very similar name to you. The content can be controlled, so like your LinkedIn or like your Twitter. It can be uncontrolled. It can be, for example, if you spoke at a conference 5 years ago about something that's now out of date and is before your experience, uncontrolled, but it's still about you. It can be incorrect. So the amount of people that we work with as an organisation, who have a prevalence on Wikipedia and they're quite well known on Wikipedia, but their birthday's wrong. It's incorrect content, and they actually can't log in and change it themselves because they're not meant to edit Wikipedia. So content can be incorrect, and it can also be outdated as well. So, for example, if you worked at an organisation 5 years ago and they haven't updated their website, and you're still there, it can be ranking quite highly. The conference one's a very popular, a very well-known issue that we come up with a lot. You say you speak at a conference in 2008 and it's still appearing number one. So the content can all be there and it can all say things about you. And just like in real life, the sentiment of that content, whether it's controlled, whether it's uncontrolled, whether it's visible, whether it's not visible, and so on, it all says something about you and it all adds up to the way you're represented online. And the key goal of online profile management, the number one goal of it, is to start to shape and craft and improve and align it to the way you want to be represented professionally online.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have some kind of online identity. Certainly I think it's very important for any professional to be on LinkedIn and to be as thorough and detailed as possible on it, for many different reasons. I think when you're introducing yourself to somebody for the first time, it's important to look professional. But look, as a professional recruiter, I would encourage people to have a thorough LinkedIn profile, because if you don't have a lot of information on there, that great opportunity that may be the job that just suits you, you'll never hear about.
And it's important then also to make sure that you are you're dealing with that content very, very well and regularly. You can't just put it out there and then set it and forget it. You have to be able to go back and update regularly. As you mentioned, the outdated content can be damning.
Look, I don't have outdated content. I mean, we all like to have current content, don't they? But if you spoke in a conference in 2008 and it's still up there, is that a bad thing? I mean, the fact is that you're highlighting the fact that you were active back then and you were talking at a conference, you were important enough to have it. If you haven't done anything since then, that may be a bit embarrassing.
Mm. So what if and also being on old websites as well.
Yeah.
If you're on your old corporate website and you're currently working in a different organisation, having that kind of outdated content can really create some confusion to the market as well.
Yeah, well, I don't have myself on old, outdated websites, but I have a couple of things on the front page of my search where people have referenced me and now listing me as being the other thing. So this has been a bit of a motivation to do a little bit of cleaning of house, because the thing about social media, it's not a task that you do once and then forget about it. It's an ongoing activity, a way of life, and you have to constantly keep track of what's going on because things change.
So what about if you can't find somebody? You go out and Google them, and ultimately their name just returns nothing but a few spammy hits. What does that mean? What does that translate to an audience, Jeremy?
Exactly, and so looking at the slide we've got on the screen now, it can signal a variety of things. And not having a LinkedIn account, if people search you on LinkedIn, they can't find you, or your LinkedIn's not coming up, not coming up in the first page of Google search results, and there's no one else really taking it. There's no one else with a famous name that's the same as yours. It signals something to the market itself. So the fact that you don't have LinkedIn, 85% of the Australian white collar market in Australia have LinkedIn. They use it. So not having it, really does provide some indications to the market that perhaps you're not as cutting edge as you may prefer to be. What if you're not finding?
For me,
sorry.
It always raises question marks for me. Remember, there was the scandal a couple of months ago about an executive that had been hired by David Jones. And I was surprised that they had hired someone who apparently, with all of these achievements to his credit, had no LinkedIn profile. That, exactly, to me, was a red flag.
Mm. So I think
exactly right.
A part of this can be a function of locking things down too much. I mean, is there an aspect of you have to balance out what you share, what you don't share, because we're all told now, make sure it's controlled, make sure it's private, and nobody can see it. Is that a function of doing too much to protect yourself?
There really is there's a fine line, and it's all about understanding and thinking about how you want to be represented to the market. And once you've decided and had a good think about it, then you can take steps to implement it. So that may be having a well-crafted and complete LinkedIn account, but it may also mean you don't want Twitter and you choose not to have it and you lock it down only for your friends to see. On the other hand, it may mean that you have an open Twitter account and you share it and make it as public and as complete and as up-to-date as possible that everyone can see and as widely viewed as possible. But it really depends on what your personal goals are online and how you like to be represented. And the definition of have you locked it down too much or too little really depends on what your personal goals are.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between personal and professional. I think it's important for people to have a professional profile on something like LinkedIn, but maybe you want to keep your personal information private. I don't have a Facebook account at all for that very reason.
You know, I want to balance out, too, because different generations view different platforms as appropriate. And before we get to that, I want to ask you in the audience, have you ever gotten in and changed those privacy settings? Have you ever gone in and done any of that work? Because there have been those scandals across the years. Have you ever done that? But yes, so, younger generations may view Instagram as an appropriate connection tool because they're younger generations. Some have grown up through Facebook and so use that as a professional tool. Are there ways that we can still use those platforms in a professional way?
And to sort of build on that, it's not just generation, it's also cross-industry as well. So, Pinterest, for example, may be more applicable to someone in the retail space, for example, compared to the legal sector. So it's cross-generational, but also cross-industry, and there's different expectations depending on what the industry is, and it's up to you to decide as a professional how you would like to be represented.
But I'm glad to see in our results here that the vast majority of people on this call have at least played around with the settings, if not more.
I'd like to encourage people to revisit those LinkedIn settings again because I think they've changed a little bit in the last couple of weeks. In the rehearsal a week or two ago when Justin and I first connected with each other, I was actually remarking on the fact that when I was viewing his public profile, I couldn't see his photograph at all. But when I viewed the profile through the ID with his user ID afterwards, I could see it. So and since then I've found 4 friends of mine whose public profile settings seem to have changed. I think LinkedIn must have done something about it that makes that difference. So I would encourage you all to go back and revisit your privacy settings to make sure that if you have a photograph, and you should, that it is visible on your public profile, because that's the one that people will find if they search for you on Google.
Yeah. So let's go through breaking down the results of someone, Jeremy.
Fantastic. So we've used Carl here, works at Telstra, and what we've done is we've gone through every single element of his online profile at a high level and to see how he's represented to the market. So the very first thing that we like to do is what everyone does on the web. They jump on Google and they search. That really is the entry point to the web. So it makes sense that we orientate the audit across Google to see where we start from. We can move out from there. So looking at the content in Google, when we search for Carl, on the left is the top half, and on the right is the bottom half of the first page of Google. And what we can see, the yellow content is controlled and relevant, and the red content is uncontrolled. So and irrelevant as well. So the main thing that I want to take away, I want you to take away from this is that in Carl's situation, it's actually quite good. He's controlling about half of the content. But the other important takeaway is that a lot of the content, in fact, all of that controlled content on the first page of Google in Carl's sense is social media. So this goes to show, in this case, the importance and the relevance and the critical nature of getting your social media right. It just ranks so well. Social media has a lot of elements and a lot of great search engine optimization elements that increase the probability of this content ranking highly on Google.
Jeremy,
and that's why we always say...
How does this contrast to somebody else? How does this rank?
Very good question. So Carl, compared to a lot of people I've worked with, so we work across a variety of sectors, across Australia, including celebrity sports stars and professional services and legal and all these different sectors. And comparing this to all of those, this is definitely above par. We work with people, even Vicky sitting in the room here. When I Google her, there's actually no content that's controlled and relevant on the first page of Google at all. So Carl is ahead of the 8 ball a bit. But if you took this and if Carl decided not to engage on any of these social media platforms, so if he didn't have a LinkedIn, didn't have a Twitter, didn't use YouTube or Pinterest, all of a sudden, all this content would be uncontrolled, it would be irrelevant, and people wouldn't be able to find him searching through Google quickly. So this really does signal the importance of social media to build your personal brand. It's not the be-all and end-all, but as an end user, it's the number one thing that you have, your number one tool you have in your toolkit that you can use to manage your personal profile online.
Jeremy, what's your view on how much of that content should be controlled by yourself versus other content that may be uncontrolled? Say, for instance, if you've been quoted in an article in BRW.
So again, it depends on the individual and the way they want to be represented to the market. But it's my general recommendation, my general view. Notwithstanding that you have to understand and speak to individuals, see what they want to be, how they want to be represented. But the larger amount of control and the larger amount of content that you own in the first page of Google, the better. If you have the first half of Google, or half of it like Carl's got here, then you have the ability to syndicate the article that you were mentioned on across LinkedIn, across Twitter, across any of the social media platforms that you use, and you can control that message. Content that's not controlled by you can get out of date very quickly and can start to detract from your personal brand. So if you have a conference that you spoke at 10 years ago and no other conferences that you've worked at or spoken at, it's perhaps not the best look. So by controlling the first page of Google as much as possible, you can decide what appears and decide what you'd like to share online, whether it's an article.
Coming from the audience right here, and I want to build out on this. And how do we build that barrier between our personal, Facebook, say, or our personal Twitter, and our professional LinkedIn, and make sure that people understand very clearly? Because say you Google me and say my Facebook is number 2, my LinkedIn is number 1. How can people understand that there are two different sides of my personality and very clearly disseminate between the two?
And that's a really good question. And in reality, it's the audience that you're engaged with and the audience that's searching for you, they actually don't know. If they're looking for the first time and they haven't met you before and they're searching for you, Facebook comes up number 2 and it's open, it's public, and everyone can see it. You may have a view about it. You may have your internal idea of how you want to be represented and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, they're looking. And so it's up to you to lock down the things that you don't want to be public and make public the things that you want to be seen. Because at the end of the day, people don't know. They're looking for you. So it's not up to you to educate them. It's up to you to provide the content that represents you in the way you want to be seen. And whether that's professional first, which I'm guessing for 99.9% of the people that's the case, you make sure that the professional contents are visible and the personal content is locked down to the greatest extent possible. If you have your Facebook locked down very well and very strongly, it's not going to rank in the first page of Google.
Vicki, now you're working at this from a professional perspective, but you still want to connect with a variety of people, family, friends, and those through the different channels. How have you approached it, and have you run into any issues?
Look, I think the consideration that I have in front of my mind is actually back to keeping the two separate. Certainly, I want to present a particular face to my work environment versus my personal life environment. So, and what I've done to keep the two separate is very consciously reduce the number of social tools that I use. So I really am, and I know it might sound a bit boring, but I really do just use LinkedIn from a professional perspective, and I just use Facebook from a personal perspective. Having gone through this social audit, it's been identified that I probably haven't done that as well as I could have, and I'll be taking steps to resolve that. But, I guess one of my issues is that I want to be seen in a certain light, but I'm also time poor. So I actually have to put all my effort into creating this professional persona, and I do it just by using one platform. Is that getting me the best possible personal profile? Possibly not, but I'm not sure that it's actually too disadvantaged. It's causing too much problem at the moment because I am just wanting to play in a particular realm. So if I wanted to be seen as a thought leader in a deep industry vertical, then I might choose some other tools. But at the moment, all I want is for when customers have got a meeting with me, for them to literally be able to land on LinkedIn and say, right, that's her expertise, and I can understand why she's coming to talk to me.
Well, actually, there's a way to sort of protect your identity, if you will, by, maybe throwing off a scent. Some people, you see them on Facebook, they use a false name. But you can also change some of those small details to help differentiate your personas. Like, Stan, you use some false information.
One of the things that I do is when I first started using social media, I got a real surprise when I got a sudden happy birthday from somebody, and I didn't recall ever giving my date of birth. Now, date of birth is actually something that one should really try and keep as private as possible, because of the fact that it is one of those security questions that the bank or tax department or whatever can use to identify you. So whenever I get asked by a social media platform, I actually put my brother's birthday on there. So that because his birthday is okay because it's not associated with his name, but it's one that I'll remember. And I'm constantly surprised at how many sort of false happy birthday messages we get. And every time that happens, I congratulate myself on having kept my identity just that much more secure. And I would encourage others to do some similar types of auditing on their personal information.
So let's jump back into the audit of Carl and dig into some of the results that we're actually seeing.
Fantastic. So what we do, and I'll skip over these two slides quite quickly, but what you need to do as individuals, and the reason we've included these here, is we need to go through, and we won't do it to save time for everyone today, but you need to go through personally yourself when you have a moment and see what each piece of content says about you. Does it add to your personal brand, or does it subtract from your personal brand? Because everything is one or the other. It may be confusing, it may be uncontrolled, it may be unrelated, it may be positive, it may be negative, all those different elements I spoke about at the start of the presentation, but they all add up to something. So what we've done, what we've included in Carl's audit that I'll skip over, is the different pieces of content that are ranking, and what do they mean for him. So see how you're represented, see if you're findable on Facebook, see if you're findable on LinkedIn, and see what those other articles or other pieces of content are about you. Are they about Justin Bieber, or are they about you speaking at an old organisation or in a past life, or so on?
Well, there was a balance here between having, like Vicki mentioned, she just has the two profiles. That's all she uses and all she focuses on. A lot of people early on in social media signed up for a Twitter account, signed up for just about everything that opened up, and then have never used it. So do you think it's more damaging to not find any results, or to find a poorly maintained result, like a Twitter that has maybe one post saying, hey, I'm on Twitter, and then you never hear from that person ever again?
Absolutely, and one of our key recommendations, and that's why I completely agree with what Vicki was saying before, is one of the worst things you can do is set up, think today, great, I want to manage my digital profile, and you go and set up all these social media accounts, and then you lose interest in a week's time. All this content starts to rank, and when people search you, they can find content, but it's a Twitter account that has 2 followers, it's got one post saying, great, I've joined Twitter, can't wait to get started, and that's it. So invest time carefully and strategically into what you want, and what you've got time to manage, and if that's just LinkedIn, that's great. Make sure you do it properly. Make sure all of the content's filled out. Make sure you've got a good photo. Make sure you've got a good summary, title, experience, education section, for example, and make sure it represents you in the best light. Because the worst thing that you can have, and we actually got some findings here for Carl as well in a few slides' time, is regarding a Pinterest account. But one of the worst things is to show that you've got an account, you've created it, but then you haven't followed through with the use of it. Absolutely.
If you're going to start, you make the decision that you're going to start blogging, think about it. It's a big decision, because once you do that, you have an obligation and an expectation that you're going to continue. And be very careful about it, because if you are going to open a blogging account, have pre-written at least 3 posts that you're going to put up, because the minute you open your WordPress account, WordPress is immediately signaling to Google, hey, there's a new account here, and it'll get indexed. And if you've just decided to open an account and then go away and come back in a couple of weeks' time, then Google will have listed you as having that blog, but it'll be blank and vacant content as well, which can actually be a negative.
Yeah. And so I was just going to say, different social networks have different levels of investment. So, like Stan was saying, a blog, because it's time-based, the way the posts are generated, it's all tied to time. The fact that you've decided not to engage in it, if you don't use it properly, it'll be very visible if your last post was 6 months or a year ago. The same goes for Twitter as well. The last post, if you don't do it and don't maintain it, it gets out of date very, very quickly. On the other side, though, LinkedIn's the opposite. LinkedIn, the content can be timeless. You could easily go 6 months if you don't change jobs, 6 months without updating the content at all. So really consider that as well when you decide to engage in different social media networks as well.
So you have on the screen right now some of the domain names, and this is one way that we can protect our identity, and that's by registering, say, a Twitter account under your name, by registering, a Pinterest account in your name, and then completely locking it down. In this way, it's kind of a defensive move. Unfortunately, JustinCleveland.com goes to that financial planner in Texas. That's not something I can get now, but I could try to find derivations and lock them down for my own name. Do you recommend parking, essentially, getting it and then just not ever using it? Or should we redirect this maybe to a LinkedIn page or to a preferable site?
One should definitely be to acquire, if it's available, yourname.com. I would strongly suggest that. And then how you use that is really up to you as an individual, and it goes down to, again, what your professional goals are. So if your professional goal is to drive traffic to your LinkedIn, well, then maybe redirect that URL to your LinkedIn account and then share your URL instead of saying, I'm Jeremy Smith, LinkedIn, au.linkedin.com/blah/blah/blah/Jeremy Smith, you can actually say, jeremysmith.com or carlnasons.com, and it goes straight through to your LinkedIn account. If you're in an industry where it's appropriate to have a personal landing page, and again, it depends on the individual, maybe you can start to create a landing page. But the most important thing, and the main reason we suggest getting these domain names is so you have them at your control, and then you can decide later down the track how you want to use them. If you miss out, if someone's got them with the same name as you, for example, especially on .com, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get back unless you the other individual's willing to sell it. .com.au, you have to have an ABN, and there's different channels you can go through to get it back if someone's using it. But it still can be quite difficult, and the cost of registering a .com email address, .com URL is $10 to $20 a year. So it's basically free, and it gives you that control.
The .net and the .orgs and all these other versions that are around that seem to be proliferating. It's quite an investment.
Yes, that's correct, and you've got to draw a line, and that's actually good to go back to the slide. So these are all available for Carl to register, but you know what? Depending on Carl's position and his goals professionally, maybe he doesn't need to register nasonsmarketinginsights.com and .net and with all these new top level domains, .melbourne, all these different .telco was probably another one that's out. You're right, Stan. It can become a very big investment. So I draw the line at perhaps yourname.com. If that's free, I would strongly recommend you acquire that. If anyone's listening and it's free, you should definitely acquire it.
I have mine registered. But then again, I've done extensive searches, and I know that there is only one Stan Rellahan in the world. So if somebody turned up and had stanrellahan.com, then had registered that and was trying to sort of pass themselves off using my name, I would then probably at that point apply to ICANN and have it stripped off them. As my defense.
Yeah. So we'll get into some of the ways to reclaim in just a minute, and I do want to mention this is if you're the Telstra folk here. If you're interested or you're looking for more information, or you have any questions about using social channels for business use at Telstra, we would encourage you to contact the social corporate office headed up by Jason Laird and his team. They can make sure that you're on the right path, and that you, if you have literally any questions, reach out, because it is your personal identity, it's your professional identity, and it ultimately reflects back on your employer, no matter who it is, your behavior through social media. So that's something to keep in mind. Jeremy, I want to run through, and we briefly talked about it as well, and that's the social media, the use of social media and parking, essentially. What should we do once we register? Say, I don't want to use Twitter. I do use Twitter, but if I didn't want to use Twitter, or I didn't want to use a blog spot, but I wanted to register my name, should I just register it and go fire off one post? What can I do to secure that account and make sure that people know that that's me?
Yeah, good question. So if you decide to proactively lock down a couple of your Twitter accounts, with your name in them, I would strongly suggest that you don't create any content, you don't put a photo up, you don't post anything, you don't have any friends or followers, because as I mentioned before, everything either adds or subtracts from your personal brand. And the worst thing that you can do is, for Twitter, for example, is register it and do a post, and then it starts to rank highly, but there's no value added, no value add there at all. So I'd suggest, if you are going to do this and you do want to practically lock down Twitter for future use, register it and keep it completely blank, and don't even add anybody, to reduce the probability of being indexed by Google and the probability of it ranking highly, because that's the last thing you want.
So I want to keep running through this, because there's a lot of good information in here. Why don't we run down through Twitter in particular, what is good on Twitter, and what can we do actually then to help bring attention if we want to use Twitter?
So the number one takeaway for Twitter that I like to quickly talk about is the ability for Google to index it and the ability for it to rank. So, looking at Carl's profile here, he's got, looks like 108 followers, I think, or 100, it's hard to read on the screen, but it's 100 or so followers that he's got. So he needs to understand that every comment he makes on Twitter goes to 100 people, but it's a lot more than that. Because it's ranking number 4 for his name, it's contributing significantly to his own personal brand. So he needs to understand that it's not just the people following him, it's also the market and the people searching for him in Google. So, a potential client or a colleague, they're going to Google him, and what comes up is a Twitter account, regardless of if they've got a Twitter account themselves. He'll be there, and it's highly indexed. So the power of Twitter is very, very high. So if you choose to engage it, understand as an individual that it actually is going to contribute to your personal brand, and use it accordingly. So whether you want to be more personable, whether you want to be a subject matter expert, whether you want to be seen as an expert in a particular industry, understand that the people who Google will be finding this, and it could be friends, it could be family, it could be colleagues, it could be a boss, it Could be anybody. And they may not necessarily know what your personal goals are. So tailor the content accordingly and tailor it very, very carefully to understand the power of it.
Excellent.
Do you think that people will look at your Twitter and see the number of followers and draw an inference from that?
Absolutely. So whether you like it or not, people draw a lot of conclusions around the amount of followers you've got. Completely, that's exactly right. I wouldn't suggest trying to get as many followers just for the sake of getting followers. But if you create high quality content that's engaging, the market likes it, the people who are following you like it, they'll retweet it, they'll share it, and you'll naturally build that following base. And by using the account appropriately,
the respectable number of followers that people will neither sort of negatively consider you or won't sort of say, well, they're trying to be a celebrity. What's a happy medium?
Yeah, so again, it really does depend. I mean, I know everyone's not a celebrity, but it really does depend on your personal goals. So, if you want to be known as a number one subject matter expert in XYZ industry, then you're going to need thousands and thousands of followers to actually have that credibility. But if you use Twitter just as a really, really basic, low-touch medium, perhaps like Carl is doing here, 100 or a couple of hundred is acceptable in my mind. And the fact that it's ranking well, it signals to Google, one of the elements is a social signal in the rankings, and it signals to Google that it's quite sort of hooked in enough into the web and into the social sphere to rank number 4. I would suggest 100 is a pretty good start. When you create your account and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 followers, that is, you are in the embarrassing zone, and you do need to work to really push it up as quickly as possible. But if you've got 108 high-quality followers who are engaging and retweeting and communicating with you, I think that's pretty good. But you should always seek to build it naturally and organically.
What about the ratio of people that you follow versus followers? I mean, I've seen people with 25,000 followers, but they're following 37,000 people. What does that say?
Yeah, there's a big debate in the industry around the following to followers ratio. Some people think that by having an equal ratio, so 1 to 1, so 100 to 100 or 20,000 to 20,000, that shows that you're equally engaged and linked into the Twitter network. But by having a different ratio, say you're following 30 people and you've got 1,000 or 2,000 followers, that sort of demonstrates you're more of a subject matter expert and more people are interested in your opinion than you're interested in their opinion. So again, it's really up to you to understand how you want to be represented to the market. But one thing I don't suggest is having a ratio in the third way, which is having not many people following you. So you're following thousands of people, but not many people are following you, because that demonstrates you're just trying to follow people for the sake of it. And you really lose track as an individual if you've got Twitter and you're following 1,000 people. It's just a fire hose of information that's providing no value to you. And it just signals that perhaps your motivations on Twitter aren't the best to the market. So as long as the ratio is in the positive side of things, follow ratio, I think you're going to be okay.
I have a tool called Friend or Follow, which I run periodically, which allows me to find people that I'm following who no longer follow me, so I can remove them. And it's a free tool. I'd recommend it. So I try to keep my ratio I follow half as many people as follow me. Is that
good? And the important thing is you've actually thought about it, and a lot of people don't think about it and don't realize how it can impact their brand. And that's the biggest thing, is you really need to think about it and how that represents you.
Because I don't want to look disconnected from people, but at the same time, I don't want to look like I'm following just for the sake of people following me back.
Well, and it's the content of the people who are following you. If you have, like Carl says, he has 10 followers that have 30,000 followers. Well, you're in the position of an opinion driver. And so it's the quality of those people, because you can go on and you can buy lists of Twitter followers, and they're ultimately little eggs who have had 17 retweets and aren't real people. So, yeah, it looks good sometimes at first glance. But ultimately, those fake views aren't doing anything for you. They're not buying concert tickets. They're not buying whatever. So what does it matter to have that large number of fake people?
And I think it's quite permissible to sort of say maybe follow people like Steve Wozniak and not expect them to follow you back.
And it can also be quite obvious if you've got a whole lot of fake followers. One click and you can see, you can often see the amount, the nature of the followers, and it's quite easy to tell if someone's got, dodgy followers or not real people. Yeah, and that will really detract from your brand.
They do that.
Yeah. So I want to jump into Facebook, because I think that's one of the other major ones that we have some confusion over where its role is in our personal and professional lives. Because I know a lot of people, and some of them are the terrible multi-level marketers who are always pitching out, "Hey guys, I lost weight with this shake," or "Wrap yourself in Saran wrap and you're going to lose weight," and they're annoying. But there is a legitimate business role for Facebook, right?
Absolutely, there completely is. And the problem with Facebook, and as a tool, it's fantastic, and it has a lot of benefit to individuals. The problem that Facebook brings is when people don't realise that it's changing their personal brand because they've got open content that they don't realise that everyone can see. So Carl's a bit of an example of this. I think it's been changed recently, but if your Facebook profile's open and your public photos are there and things that don't align to the way you want to be seen online, and they're visible, that can really change your profile brand without you knowing about it and without it being optimized and aligned to the way you want to be seen. So it's very, very important just to understand the power of Facebook and the prevalence of it. And if you are, if there's some multi-level marketers listening here and they really want to be putting content out there and advertising and stuff, well, maybe you should leave your Facebook open. But the important thing is that you need to understand that it's open and the content that you're sharing is public. The worst thing is when you've got content, you think it's private, you think it's between you and your friends only, and it's public. And Carl's sort of a bit of an example with a few friends and family and kids. None of them in themselves are bad. Don't get me wrong; they're not negative, but I don't think they're perhaps contributing professionally to Carl's digital profile. And if they did, and if he knows about it, that's fine. If you choose to do it, that's great. But it's all about the knowledge and the understanding that the content's there. So I would strongly recommend that individuals, on this call and people listening in, jump on Facebook or jump onto a web browser and perhaps go in incognito mode so you're not logged into anything, and then see what you can find out about yourself on Facebook. See what content's there. And then perhaps log on to a friend's Facebook account or someone else who you don't have connection with and see what they can see about you. See what happens if they search through Facebook Open Graph and see what content comes up. And then I'd strongly suggest logging on and changing the privacy settings accordingly, depending on what your goals are. That could be to open it up. Maybe you want more content public. But it could also be, in most cases, it's to lock it down and hide it as much as possible. So in that case, I suggest changing the privacy settings accordingly. But the important thing is that you know that the content's there and what's being visible to the public. You need to know what's visible. That's the number one thing.
What I thought was really interesting when I talked with Carl about these pictures, I said, do you want these up here? And he said, well, no, I don't. I mean, they're kind of personal, but at the same time, no, they were at the time of your audit findable, and it's a thing where they are out there. So I think you really do have to be aware. Now, Vicki, we talked earlier about your use of Facebook. Now, you use it for family stuff. How do you feel about putting your family up there when sometimes especially folks with young kids, they want to share it. They want to share the kids with everyone. How do you feel about putting up the family?
Well, I think the first point is I didn't realise I was exposing those personal shots as broadly as I ended up exposing them, and I think that was really quite mortifying in some respects because there were photos on there that I very happily share with friends and family, but certainly not work colleagues or certainly not the CEO of a customer that I'm about to go and meet with. So that was one of those holy shit moments for me. But secondly, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, actually, I'm actually creating a digital footprint for my children. That even though it's all very innocent and all that sort of stuff, I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't realised the extent of the exposure given how prevalent social media is these days and what very clever companies are doing in respect to people's personal photos and trying to tie marketing campaigns to them and all those sorts of things. So, I very quickly shut that down. Well, I think I have, and I hope I have. But yeah, it really sort of made me stop and think at the implications of all of that. Maybe my children don't want me to be creating a digital footprint without their consent, and even though they're only 4 and 6, who knows when they turn 18 whether I'm going to be slapped with a lawsuit or something. I just don't know.
Well, and I'm not saying that your photos are embarrassing, but I want to ask those listening at home, in the office, wherever you are, has anyone ever done that to you? Have they ever uploaded an embarrassing photo to Facebook? Were you mortified? Did you own it? Did you ask them to take it down? Or did you are you so lucky that you've never had anyone take an embarrassing photo of you? And actually, I had a question come in from the audience that I want to hit on, and this jumps back to Twitter a bit, but which is better for Twitter, Jeremy, do you think? Is it the personal material? Is it the connections with friends or with people in interest groups? Or is it more professional content?
So the important thing about Twitter is that all of the content's public, unless you lock your tweets down, which sort of decreases a lot of the value of the platform. But unless you lock your tweets down, all of the content's public. So as long as you're sort of cognizant of the fact that everyone can see it, so professional people can see it, your boss can see it, the future employers can see it, your friends can see it, your family can see it, then you can use it appropriately. The good thing about Facebook is, for personal use, you can lock it down, you can make it so only your friends can see it, and you can act accordingly. So because of that, so it's not really something inherent in Twitter, it's more the fact that Facebook provides the service of locking it down so no one else can see it, that I would recommend keep everything personal on Facebook if you're going to syndicate, sort of have a federated identity. Keep all the personal stuff on Facebook, and make sure Twitter's as professional as possible, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if your friends and family see that you're professional, but it matters a lot if your professional colleagues and potential clients and so on see that you're very personable and out doing things that you may not want them to see in the public light. So I would suggest keep Twitter professional where possible, it's because it's got a wider audience, and then use the niche of Facebook just to have it close to your friends and family.
So, by the way, our results here is that about a majority, about a half, have said that yes, they've had a bad picture taken or a bad, something embarrassing put up, and they reached out to that person and asked them to take it down, which I think is a good strategy. I think most people will understand. Oh yeah, you're probably right. That's not something you want floating around out there. So that's a good thing that people are able to ask. I did have a question come in from the audience about that topic we talked about, the digital footprint for kids. Jeremy, do you have guidance for parents about creating that digital footprint and creating that digital identity and paper trail for a kid, whether they should do it, shouldn't do it, but how much should they be sharing about that kid?
I think at the end of the day, it's really up to the parent to really make that decision. But when they make that decision, I think they should be informed to the greatest extent possible about the power of those different technologies. So, if they choose, because obviously they have their kids' best interests at heart, if they choose to share something on Facebook, they need to know that, depending on their privacy settings, the reach of that photo or that comment or that message is where it's going to go. Is it going to be in public and it can be potentially sucked up by somewhere else and put all across the web? Or is it locked down to a carefully locked down profile that only goes to their close friends and family? So it's all about, as a parent, I strongly suggest you really look carefully at your profile settings, your privacy settings, and then use it accordingly. As a general sort of standing recommendation, I'd be very careful about what you put on Twitter, for example, because that's not locked down as much as Facebook is. I'd be very careful about putting and blogging about different content related to your kids, because again, you lose control really, really quickly. With Facebook, for all its drawbacks, is great if you use it properly and set the privacy settings properly, and then you can control that message to some extent.
Is there any super secret privacy level that we need to know about? I mean, is private enough? Is friends private enough? What's the go-to word for?
Yeah, really good question. The problem is with Facebook, and this is one of the biggest frustrations with me anyway with Facebook, is that the privacy settings change all the time. They do tell you, but it's one of those 1,000 emails you get that you never read. And the privacy settings can change, on a day-by-day or week-by-week basis. So something that may have previously only been private may become public and may become visible. So it's really up to you to understand and look at and take the responsibility to look at the privacy settings and see how they reflect on you. So you can easily jump on and, as I mentioned, look at use a web browser when you're not logged in and see what you can find about yourself and then tailor the privacy settings accordingly.
So I want to run into LinkedIn now. Yeah, and I think Carl has a very good LinkedIn profile, and I think what you should look for are very obvious. It's descriptive, it's a good picture, it's well lit, there's a good headline here, and a good summary. Those are all things that I think everybody should do, and those are good things to look for here. But what I want to talk about are the things that maybe aren't here, or the rearranging. And I just found out yesterday that you can rearrange the sections on LinkedIn. So Jeremy, run me through what a good LinkedIn profile looks like and what the benefits are of it.
So the number one important thing to think about LinkedIn is you control the platform and you own it. So it's up to you to craft it to the way that you want to be represented to the market. So there's some must-haves though. So as you mentioned, the photo is critical. Whether you like it or not, people look at the photo. There's so much data around heat maps and screen, technologies that look at the part of the screen you're looking at, and the photo is the number one source and the number one thing people look at. So having a professional photo is actually important. And again, having a title and a description that's accurate, having an up-to-date summary that reflects where you're currently at in your career, so not 2 years ago, not 1 year out of date, where you currently are at this point in time. And Carl's done that really, really well. But there's, like as you mentioned, there's a few areas for improvement. And again, this goes back to you owning and controlling that platform to manage and portray yourself in the light you want to be seen as. And publications here, it's an example. So publications have been moved up, so it's great that Carl moved it up because it's important. But you've got to be sort of careful about what you share. So looking at the video, when we did the audit, only 14 views. So it's awesome that you've chosen to put publications there, controlling the platform. But what you're choosing and that nature of that content that you're choosing to share is very important as well. So maybe I suggest
I don't know if Carl's embarrassed by that, but I am.
But it was part of a larger program.
Yes,
it was just 14 views on YouTube. It was. Yeah.
I'll have to show him how to SEO that so we can actually get a little bit more respectable numbers on there.
Yeah. Is that something we could just hide that number so that it doesn't matter?
No, if you're on YouTube, you get noticed. So look, there are a couple of things you can do, and I'd suggest that anyone that goes and posts anything on YouTube is to make use of that section underneath where you can put more. You've got quite a bit of stuff. I think you've got up to 2,000 characters that you can put in there. So if it's small enough content, like 4 or 5 minutes, you can actually put a complete transcription there. And if it's a long hour-long program or half-an-hour program, that you select keywords and phrases that people are likely to search for. Because remember, YouTube is owned by Google, and whenever you look for any Google search, they put the YouTube video content right at the very top. So if you've actually got something, you can put some keywords and phrases in there, and you'll find that will dramatically change the search results. And I'm going to work with Carl over the next few weeks to see if we can put some keywords and some SEO-friendly stuff there and see what a difference it'll make to our views.
Yeah, and it's good to point out, too, that the results of this audit were things that were actionable items for Carl, and that's kind of what Xanady does, is provide things that are easily and quickly fixable. Yeah. So let's run through some of the other things in LinkedIn, because I think it's a very powerful tool. Jeremy.
Fantastic. So the next one to look at is, again, another component of LinkedIn that you can choose to have. So volunteers and experience, just in the bottom right-hand corner there. So Carl's chosen to have that section. You don't have to have it. It's not compulsory. You can remove it. But it's not filled out. So again, this goes back to that theme of everything in your profile, everything on the web, everything you choose to engage with either adds or subtracts from your digital profile. So by having the volunteer experience section there, actively putting it there and choosing to put it there, but not filling it out, can potentially detract from your LinkedIn profile quite a bit. So it's quite important to think about what you're doing, think about the areas you want to be involved in and known for, but then remove the areas that you're not going to fill out, like the volunteer and experience section. That's very, very important as well. The use of multimedia content, again, it's quite important, and it can really beef up your profile and make it look professional, and really demonstrate if you're in an IT sector space, especially that you understand how to use these tools to the greatest extent possible. But again, you've got to choose the content appropriately. In this case, we've got that same video with only 14 views, which is something to carefully think about what you're posting as well.
So what we've got, a good profile obviously is attractive in and of itself, and it's a part of the tool of building that network. Vicki, you went through, and you had a good profile before your audit. What did you do to help build that network on LinkedIn, and how do you approach someone?
So it has to be very personalised in the approach, and I guess the way I build my network is based on who I'm doing business with or want to do business with. So I think about, certainly from my roles perspective, there's an assigned portfolio of customers that I'm engaged with. And so my focus was on C-suite in that portfolio. So there are some really cool tools that are available to help you very quickly search for and find C-suite contacts within a list of defined companies. That's probably for another conversation. But very quickly I was able to come up with a target list, and then I reached out with a personal message. And it wasn't personal as in, I like your profile, I thought we should connect, but one that was really relevant in respect to either the industry that they were in or the types of challenges that I felt that they may be suffering from and would like to have a conversation about those sorts of things. When I have actually met with somebody, I will then also look to connect with them via LinkedIn, and again attach a personal note to say, there are times when I put up articles that could be of relevance to them. They might want to connect with me, and so it's an open invitation without it being a difficult thing for them to either accept or decline as well. So, but it's not just one random sort of tick in the box where you get, Vicki Holland would like to connect with you. I make sure that the messaging is really relevant.
One of the other things that I've actually just changed my mind on very recently is whether you want to keep the fact that you visited somebody's profile visible or invisible. So look, as a recruiter, I visit hundreds of profiles every day. And I, for a long time, kept the fact that I'm one of those invisible people that's visited your profile and doesn't show it, so that I wouldn't raise false expectations. Because if you visit somebody's profile, I've had a few people, when I made it visible, they've contacted me and say, I see you visited my profile recently. Is there anything I can do to help you? Now, for me, that's probably counterproductive. But there is a very good argument to be made to keeping yourself visible, so that when people can see that you visited your profile, you'll find a goodly number of those people will visit you back, which will increase your number of page views, which will then raise your profile within the LinkedIn community. And some of those will actually reach out and connect with you. And if they spontaneously send you an invitation, that is actually a very, very positive thing. You haven't embarrassed yourself by being rejected and sending them an invite and being refused or ignored. But if they reach out to want to connect with you, then that actually means they're very positively disposed. So you may want to interchange the two. Visit people that you're interested in when you've got your settings private, and then set them back to visible, and then just quickly click on bookmarks for those particular individuals to let them know that you visited them.
Yeah.
And so that way you can reach out to C-suite people, find a short list that you want to see, bookmark those, and then set yourself to being visible, and then visit them again, and then they'll see that you visited them. Mm-hmm. And that might in itself start producing a positive dialogue.
Yeah. So I think we've hit on the importance of balancing out your privacy and making sure that the information out there that you want to be seen is solid, it's well put together. So we asked you earlier on in this call to Google yourself, in essence. And what I want to know now, are you in control of your digital identity? You've gone out, you've looked for yourself. If you Google yourself, are you number 1 through 10? Or are you, well, maybe a couple of them, your Facebook, your Twitter, maybe your LinkedIn come up, or you just get one search result and maybe it's a newspaper article, or do you have nothing, like I do? You have nothing on the front page whatsoever. So, or you may have material that's out there that you don't control. So there are a lot of different things that can happen here. And I want to, Jeremy, ask you then, what can we do? What's the first simple step that I could do today while on this call to make myself more visible?
So the number one thing, depends on your current state, but the number one thing, if you don't have it, set up a LinkedIn account. I can't recommend that any more strongly than I'm trying to. If you don't have LinkedIn, you've got to get it. It's absolutely critical. We've just seen on Carl's profile how well it ranks, with really little effort compared to, say, building a full website that's about yourself. So number one thing is get LinkedIn. Which is, you should definitely do. It's quite easy to do. There's a few other things you can do, and it starts to really depend on how you want to be portrayed to the market. So if you think that Twitter is relevant to your industry or area of subject matter expertise, consider using it. But again, make sure you've got the time investment to spare and spend writing content, tweeting, engaging, and so on. And then from there, the sky's the limit, really, and it depends on what your goals are. So if you'd like to get some content on the existing corporate website, because corporate websites tend to, especially if you work for a large organization, tend to rank really well, and in Google's eyes, those URLs carry a lot of weight. So creating some content, creating bio, putting your experience, for example, on the corporate page is a great way to start. But then, from there, you can do whatever you like. You can create your own personal website, for example, which, if you choose to do that, and have the time to do it and the time to invest in it, can be another way to really control your brand, because that will rank really highly, because nothing ranks better than a site dedicated to your name. It's all about you. But the sky really is the limit. But number one is LinkedIn. Strongly recommend it. And if you've got it, make sure you actually optimize it and fill out the content properly.
So let's run through some other actionable items. Now, let's be clear. This is an investment of your time. You are going to have to do this now, and you're going to have to continue to do it in the future. But run us through what's the best things. What are some of the best things to do?
So as I just mentioned, it really is all about social. Looking at Carl is a perfect case in point. The importance of social media. Your digital profile isn't just social media by any means. It's a lot more than that. But as an individual, the number one toolkit that you've got is this other social media network. So properly optimizing it, engaging and using them is my number one recommendation. It's a lot more effort and a lot more trouble to create a bio on your corporate website or create a URL on a personal profile domain page. It's a lot more effort, and LinkedIn and Twitter and Pinterest, if you choose to use it, can start to control your profile. So that social media really is extremely important, and that's the number one thing. Organizations like ours, we do a lot of work across the end-to-end profile management. It can involve a lot of time and auditing and understanding in depth what everything means and crafting to the best extent possible that first page of Google. And that, that requires perhaps some more resources that some people, would like to dedicate or have to dedicate. So in the absence of engaging someone like us, social media is the way to go as a first step.
So let's run through some of the other things that we can do, particularly, with your Twitters and your Facebooks.
Fantastic. So just skipping to the next slide, we've got some series of a few recommendations just as a takeaway and things that you can think about for yourself later today. Perhaps jot these down and just check if you've done them yourself, and if you haven't, perhaps update them this afternoon. And this is the best thing about these social networks. The tools are already there. The content management is already built in. You just need to write it. You just need to put in some time to create it, which is a lot less than, for example, starting to blog or starting to update a website or creating a domain name. Or personal landing page. So is your headline accurate? Does it convey your digital profile properly? Is it aligned to what you want to do? Is your photo aligned to your desired personal branding? So everything's fine. So it can be relaxed, it can be formal, it can be professional. But if you thought about it, and if you thought how, and is it congruent to the way you want to be seen? So if you're a lawyer, you probably don't want that shot at the beach. If you're someone who's for example, a personal trainer, well, maybe you do want that shot of the beach. It really depends. So you've got to understand and make sure that content is congruent. Is the contact information accurate? The amount of times we see old email addresses and old URLs on LinkedIn, it's just crazy. Does your profile summary describe you in the way that's aligned to you? Is your professional gallery? Is your experience highlighted? Are your skills and endorsements aligned to your goals? So if you've been endorsed for things, and we see this all the time, someone who's had a dramatic shift in their career because they've chosen to change, but 90% of their endorsements are around the old career and not around the new career. So perhaps seek endorsements from colleagues who are happy to give it to you around areas that are more aligned to the way you want to be seen in the future. Is your education section complete? So all these hygiene factors, publications, related organisations and honours and awards, making sure they're filled out to the best extent possible. And moving on to Twitter, the sentiment of the tweet. So if you choose to use Twitter, how does it impact your digital profile? So have a look, if you've done 50 or 100 tweets in your life, have a look through them and go, does this represent how it should be to the market? So, one of the things that we do in the detailed audit is actually pull Twitter apart and say, you've got 80% of your tweets are about footy on Friday night and 20% about professional. What does this reflect on your personal brand, and how can we create a content plan and work together to actually align the Twitter accounts and the way you're engaging, the way you're using it, to the way you want to be seen to the market? Is the banner image reflect your digital profile? People can find that, as I mentioned, Twitter ranks so highly in Google. The banner image is actually really important to craft the way you want to be presented to the market. Is the avatar consistent, like in LinkedIn? Is your description fully highlight desired profile? Does it tie the different areas together? So is there a URL pointing back to your corporate website, for example? Does your following ratio, that Stan was talking about, reflect your subject matter expertise? So that could be engagement, where it's close 1-to-1, or it could be a subject matter expert, where it's 1,000-to-1. And what does the content say generally about your digital profile?
Yep. So Jeremy, we're running out of time. I want to just have our last say. We've got some great takeaways from you, Vicky. You went through the audit. What would be your number one takeaway for the thing that you are actioning?
Locking down my Facebook account and have done. It was absolutely, it was one of those really scary moments when I thought, that's not what I want people to see from a public perspective.
And Stan, what's your number one takeaway?
My number one takeaway actually is not something we've really discussed here, but I think is think very clearly about what it is that you want to communicate about yourself and come up with a clear value proposition. So figure out who it is that you want to attract most of all. Is it clients? Is it more connections? Is it colleagues? And actually give something in your summary that actually pitches yourself in a way that's going to be representing value to them.
Yeah. So, again, Jeremy Smith from Xanady, Vicky Holland from Telstra, and Stan Relihan from PRA. Thank you very much for taking some time and talking through. I think there's a lot to process in here and a lot we have to work on. So for you in the audience, thank you for taking a couple of minutes and talking about your social profile, your social selfie, and some ideas for the future. You'll see a survey along the bottom of your screen. Please pop that up. Let us know what you thought about the event today. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us for anything. Jeremy, what's the website for Xanady?
Xanady.com.au.
Xanady.com.au, just that easy. So thank you again all for joining us here on this Telstra virtual event. I'm Justin Cleveland.